If you're like me and you've watched the James Bond films, then you've always wanted the Aston DB5s, the DB11s, the Lotuses, and even the rare Toyotas that were in the movies, and I definitely have. However, if you can't quite afford those yet, I've come up with a list of 5 really cool cars that Bond did use or were in the background that you might want to consider. And some of these are actually some of my favourite cars from the movies today, and I actually have a good reason for picking them all. You might also be interested to know that most of them are, for the most part, under £20,000 on this list, or even up to as little as £3,000. So, without further ado, hope you enjoy this video. I've gone from the rarity, the most unique, and some of just the cool cars that were in the films over the many decades. Kicking off with the first car of choice is the BMW 750iL, or 750 from the 1990s or early 2000s, and this is a Bond car I absolutely loved. It was just very iconic for me, and even though it wasn't an Aston, it was nothing British sports car like, it was a BMW 750, and alongside always really liking these cars, I actually really loved it in the Bond film from Tomorrow Never Dies, if you remember it, way back in the day. And these were really cool, and I think really fitting for Bond, and it's actually a shame they don't go back to the 750 or BMW. I came with a 5.4 litre V12, though these were pretty hefty for the time, and you can actually get these now for up to £12,500, so pretty expensive, but I'm sure there are cheaper out there. Talking specs, these came with 320 horsepower for the most part, and had a pretty powerful engine with almost V12-like power and 3,500 RPM. So some of these were really powerful, and the twin turbo in some of them was even more ridiculous, creating almost 400 horsepower. And these were just very popular. I think what's great about them as well is that they're pretty luxury, and they are thirsty. However, they still look really understated. I think would beat most BMWs today, and even in a car park, I would choose this over a modern one because I love the 750iL or the 750i Sport. They look so cool, and that's why Bond looked good in them as well. Up next is a slightly different car this time, and it is the Renault 11 from the 1984 film A View to Kill with Roger Moore. This one is very popular, and you might remember this car as the one that got crushed. Now, before you judge this car, this is definitely a car you should consider because they made these in the turbo, and they were really popular, really cool to drive. Now, yes, it did get crushed, and it's not the most fancy of cars like an Aston or a Lotus, but the Renault 11 still has a place in Bond history, and I think it's really cool because it just looks sort of different from your usual average Bond car. And when you see one of these, you might think, oh, it is in Bond. Now, it is very ultimately French, and that's what I love about these cars. Obviously, all Renaults are awesome, and price-wise, they aren't too bad at all, with only £3,000 to £4,000 for some of these. However, they are quite rare, so looking for some is a bit of a problem when you are on that search. Now, what these are great for small French cars that were produced, and they were made from the 80s up until the 2000s, and for the most part were pretty popular, really reliable, and a lot of fun to drive. And that's probably why they used it as a stunt car in View to Kill. So what I love about this is it's probably the cheapest car on this list, but it just has a cool car. Now, these came in a 1200cc, so they weren't fast, but because they were so light, it made it faster than most of the actual competitors. And they also did it in a saloon version looking like this, which I thought looked really cool as well, and it's definitely something to consider if you are on a tight budget but really want to be like Bond. In this particular clip, you can see a modified one, and it is a Renault 11 Turbo, so even the cool versions are still out there. Now, in terms of popularity and how many there are, I'm not too sure, and they were definitely very limited, especially being in the UK, but I know you can get a lot from Europe, so if you are really interested in a Renault 11 or Renault 9 as they were also known, definitely consider looking at some of the European buy and sell pages, because I think these are very understated for what they are and could potentially become a future classic. Up next is the Bond Citroen 2CV. Now, in fairness, this is a bit of a catch because this was actually a modified flat-four air-cooled engine, so it wasn't a standard Citroen 2CV. However, you can own a Citroen 2CV quite easily in the UK because we seem to quite like them, and they all came to the UK as well, especially being not far from France. I think we got a lot of the French cars. What I love about Bond cars again is that they use more French in the sort of background cars, and they were just very quirky, and I love them. Now, Citroen 2CVs have been rising in value quite a bit over the last few years, but it's not too bad. For the most part, they have been up to around £9,000 to £10,000, but some can go for more. However, that's definitely more affordable than, again, the supercars we've seen. They're also timeless classic. With Citroen 2CVs, they were so popular and were made for many decades, from 1948 up until 1990. So across the world, the Citroen 2CV is well renowned for its engine, its reliability, and its ability to just be a farmer's car, and it was very popular as well. And I think that's where the Citroen 2CV has created its own legacy, and it's actually a really popular car pretty much worldwide as well. It was sold everywhere. Now, unfortunately, it didn't come with a lot of power at all. I've heard like some came with 9 horsepower, so yeah, it was pretty slow. So don't think there's going to be much speed out of this thing, but for the looks, this is what it's all about. Having a 2CV is absolutely incredible, and you will get a lot of people looking at you because this thing stands out even today. Up next is a car I've actually talked about recently on the channel, and it's the Alfa Romeo GT or GTV6, as also shown in the Bond film Octopussy from 1983. I absolutely love this car because it is just so different from what we have had, and I have praised this car in previous videos for being one of my favourite Alfa Romeos, and there's definitely still the case with this, and it just looks really cool. Now, you might remember it was driven in a high-speed chase with the police, and Bond obviously used it to get away. And what I love particularly about this is that it is really, really cool and rare. Now, some of these can go up to £15,000, some less than £10,000, depending on the age and spec and also how it looks. But for the most part, these have been really popular because of their interior, their Alfa Romeo background, and it's just becoming a bit of a rarity now. You don't see many of them, and a lot of people love them as collectors. From production from 74 to 87, this was a very cool little car, almost like a hatchback coupe, and it was actually known as a fastback. They came from 1.6 litres to 2.6 litres, and it was pretty cool and fast. Now, you might know that some people like Jeremy Clarkson own one, so that makes it even more predominant, and it had a really cool design background. So if you really want to get into the Bond scene, Alfa Romeo GTV6. In the 1971 films Diamonds Are Forever, Sean Connery drives a very popular, cool British sports car, the Triumph Stag, in this very short scene where he's actually driving out of Dover and through to France. And in this really pretty car, I think it was really awesome. And yes, it wasn't used much, but here you can see it has become a bit of a memorabilia for the Bond films. Now, you're probably more aware of the Triumph Stag than most if you are from the UK, because it was a really cool British sports car, 2+2 sports tourer, sold from 70 to 78. And these are actually kind of collectors now. A lot of people really like these for their British heritage, and Triumph aren't really making cars, so these are really cool to come across. But they're the most popular sort of classic car in terms of what there is on the market. Now, they came with cool 3-litre Triumph V8s, and that was pretty fast and loud for the time. And I think these are really stylish and almost like Italian looking, but that would explain why it was designed by an Italian designer. In terms of their curb weight, they were only 1300 kg, so not too bad. But obviously Triumph at the time did have reliability issues, as most British cars did. However, they do have a 3-litre engine, and it just looks and sounds fantastic. So finding one of these at the price points can be a bit more, again, mostly in the 10 to 20k mark, but these look to be going up in price being a classic car. So they are definitely ones to look out for, and actually, even though it had a short appearance in Bond, one of my favourites on this list by far. Just a few extras from me. I think it's worth pointing out that the Z3 was really cool because it was used in GoldenEye and it had many features, and I quite liked it in that as well, starting the BMW trend, as well as the Sunbeam Alpine that was really praised when it was in Dr. No in 1962 for one of the first sports cars that we saw. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video on Bond cars on a budget that you could potentially afford if you're really into James Bond, but you can't quite get the Aston Martin just yet. However, I do believe in you. So if you did enjoy these cars and you had some ideas from it and you still want this selection, definitely consider them. They're all great cars I chose from, including the bonuses. See you in the next video.